to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings. I can advise that attendees should not disclose any personal information of individuals, as that would infringe the data protection rights of that individual. If everybody could please mute their microphones when they're not speaking. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Leslie Page. Item 2, to receive declarations of interest. Firstly, statutory, any pecuniary interest and any non-pecuniary interest. So does anybody have a pecuniary interest? No. Anybody have any non-pecuniary interests? Councillor Woodhead?
Sorry, I was trying to find which part it was in relation to it's in relation, sorry, into C. Sorry, 10D. 10D in terms of being a resident of the bulk, which is obviously impacts on the property being discussed.
Okay, that's fine. Item 10D, non-pecuniary for Councillor Woodhead then. Okay, any other non-pecuniary interests? No. Item 3, Town Mayor's announcements. So on Sunday the 2nd of April, I had the pleasure of attending Community Interest Company's performance at the Weatherly Centre, and the Community Interest Company is called Imagination Dance. They are set up across Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire and part of Cambridgeshire, offering dance opportunities and movement opportunities for those who don't normally get the opportunity to do that. So some of their attendees are children with learning challenges, but also elderly and people with dementia. The show was very well attended by friends, family and others in the community. I'd say probably over 120 people came along to watch. I was very impressed by the effort that the children had put in over a long period of time and how well they did performing in front of a crowd. I look forward to attending future events, including a charity walk next week, which is being organised partly by Imagination Dance, but others as well. Secondly, just another announcement from me. So if we could please make sure that committee meeting minutes come to the final council before the election. We need to make sure, please, that all of the committee meeting minutes are considered this side prior to a refresh in May. Councillor Russell, do you have any announcements or not?
No, thank you.
Okay. Item 4, public open session, to adjourn for a period of up to 15 minutes to allow members of the public to put questions or to address the council through the chairman pertaining to matters listed on the agenda. Each speaker will have 1 3-minute slot. So we don't have anybody in the room. Is there anybody online? No. Okay. Item 5, so invited speaker. So it's a pleasure to welcome Tom Leeming from Tritax Symmetry to address the council in relation to Stratton Business Park. Tom, would you like to come and take this chair? And we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
I know about the button now, having presented several times. It's remind me to turn it off. Thank you very much to the Town Council for inviting me to speak this evening. The last time I presented was in October on a dark, wintry evening, so good to see it's getting lighter. And I came in to talk about the phase 3, then a pending application or pending submission relating to 3 industrial units to the rear of Stratton Business Park, and what we call Symmetry Park, Biggleswade. And just a reminder for everyone, it's effectively the land behind the co-op and adjacent to phase 2 that's already been delivered. Just as a very brief reminder of who I am, again, Tom Leeming. I work at Tritax Symmetry, which is a development arm of Tritax Big Box REIT, which is a FTSE 250 real estate investment trust based in London. And we are long-term owners of industrial units across the UK. And so, again, I wanted to emphasise that because, again, we are long-term owners. We take an interest in what we develop. We don't just develop them, let them and trade them on. And we still own the co-op and 3 of the 4 most recently developed buildings on the latest phase. Yeah, there we go. So I wanted to come today. We received obviously the objections from the town council, which was a shame, but understandable having read through them. And I haven't been able to respond before now because we were still in negotiations with Central Bedfordshire Council on various mitigation measures, including the ones included in your letters of objection. I think if I take each point on its own, and we address these in a letter which hopefully you all received last week, and we want to come back in some detail on the points just to emphasise that we have taken them, or we'd actually already taken them on board and we're addressing them, but now we've got a final position with Central Bedfordshire. So firstly, well, there were several points here. Traffic was mentioned in the initial objection. Section 106 funds for speeding, access to the A1, leisure facilities and buses to the town centre as a reminder. So taking each one on its own. The speeding funds from a section 106 point of view are there and available. We have done a lot of work, extensive work with Central Bedfordshire Highways Authority. And actually, we were due to go to committee originally in March, but because of the extensive surveying and mitigation measures we're putting in, or we're proposing to put in place subject to planning, that has been delayed to the April committee. So in terms of speeding, there will be additional speed signs, 30-mile-an-hour signs, and that is directly in response to a speed survey we did on Pegasus Drive, which did show that many of the vehicles using Pegasus Drive do speed, which you're probably all aware of, but clearly we had to do a formal survey to prove that. In addition to the speed signs that are going up, there'll be some additional road markings as well. And this point sort of ties in with the capacity concerns you had regarding traffic around Pegasus Road, London Road roundabout, and access to the A1. So what we've worked very closely with Central Beds on is effectively a modification to the access to the roundabout from Pegasus Drive as you head towards London Road, which effectively allows an HGV and a car to sit together at that roundabout, which isn't possible currently, and that's simply a widening of the roadway there on Highways land, so that again the HGV can turn left onto the A1 while a car at the same time turns right to Biggleswade town centre, for example. So that alleviates much of the existing traffic issues at peak times. Also, just as a reminder that the developments that we bring forward, the distribution developments tend to be off-peak traffic, so they tend to spread it through the day, and very particularly late mornings are relatively busier, and very early mornings are relatively busier because clearly HGVs are going out to deliver to stores, etc. So you don't want to meet peak traffic. So there are improvements there to the capacity. We've also introduced several pedestrian crossings up Pegasus Drive, and this integrates with your point around the sort of leisure facilities. And if you'll know Pegasus Drive and Stratton Business Park well, there was a new section of road put in to access what is now the co-op and also the council-owned land at the end. And that has got a nice combined cycleway, pedestrian way. We're extending that down Pegasus Drive towards London Road, so it links in with the town centre. Also links in with the pedestrian crossings, the newly proposed pedestrian crossings down Pegasus Drive, which link into certain side roads, Lancaster Way, for example. So it creates a sort of integrated, sustainable transport route for people wanting to walk and cycle to work or for leisure. So that's another element there. So that, I think that's probably Pegasus Drive done. The actual application site, what we call phase 3 Symmetry Park Biggleswade, there are several rights of way running adjacent to the site at the moment. And what we volunteered initially as part of the application was to actually link up the public rights of way around the site. So you've got a bridleway which currently heads to a dead end at the A1, which clearly isn't very inviting for any users. So we're actually converting or proposing to convert an existing pedestrian path to the west of the site, plus a new pedestrian and bridleway link up to the east of the site. So actually you've got a nice circular route running around the site. In addition to the creation of that extension, we're also contributing through the 106, £170,000 to the part surfacing of that to allow accessible use of that all year round. And that will be used by employees of the park as well as locals and anyone, frankly, who wants to use it. It will be, they are public rights of way. And that adds to the improvements we've already made on the phase 2 element of the site. In addition, in terms of leisure facilities, there's a condition relating to public art. So we'll be introducing some kind of public art. At the moment, we've shown a sort of seating area within the site. We put what we call trim trails within our sites, which effectively are loosely guided routes through the landscaped areas for employees to use. And then the proposal is that we'll introduce an outdoor gym in part of the site as well as part of the delivery. Clearly Central Bedfordshire have certain standards in terms of cycle provision for sustainable transport, and we adhere to all of those standards. As you'll see if you drive around the park at the moment, there are covered cycle storage facilities. There are cycleways within our parks, and that is proposed that is extended through this current application. There are showers within the units for cyclists and others, and we also think about how the cyclists can very easily get from the covered cycle parking through a dedicated door into the unit, so they can, if the customer wants to put more showers in for cyclists, they can do very easily. So we facilitate that. In terms of sustainable transport, and we'll continue on this theme, buses was mentioned in one of the objections. So we've been working closely again with Central Bedfordshire, and cutting to the chase, there is now a contribution by us over a 5-year period of £750,000 towards the provision of a new bus from the town centre and the station through down London Road, through Pegasus Drive and through the existing Stratton Business Park. And we are also introducing 2 new stops adjacent to the co-op, a new stop in the phase 2, which we've just, the development we've just delivered, and a lay-by bus stop within the current proposed phase 3 that is being heard at committee next week. So there's a very clear bus route there. We're also funding a traffic plan coordinator at the council at reasonably large cost, but to ensure that they work with the existing occupiers of the park, again, Co-op and Bond International, Noatum and Bowman Ingredients, and others on wider Stratton Business Park, to make sure that the service is advertised appropriately, it is responsive to the hours of the employees, and then it is hopefully well used and subsidised, so that we effectively provide seed funding to it, and it will then become self-funding as more and more people use it. So that's buses done, and again that's a commitment through the section 106. Archaeology and ecology was mentioned in the most recent objection, and I mean that just to say that they are dealt with, as very serious items within a planning application, as you'd expect. And taking archaeology first, this is all covered within the ES part of the application, that we've already undertaken archaeological trenching over the site, and that is perfectly standard as part of a planning application on a large scale development such as this, and that informs our team of archaeological specialists and the Central Bedfordshire county archaeologist, so that they can then, going forward, subject to planning, come up with a more detailed plan of mitigation for the archaeology. It's exactly as we have done on the phase 2 development we've just delivered on the co-op site that's previously delivered in 2021, and others have delivered on other parts of Stratton Business Park, and that the archaeology may well be what they call preserved in situ. So if you're building over the top several meters high, it can be preserved underneath buildings, footprints of buildings, or clearly if you're cutting into that area, then the area intends to be excavated and any features recorded. And we did find, for the cost of £350,000 on the co-op phase of doing the archaeology, we found 5 Roman brooches, which was quite nice to see. So at least we found something. Well, actually, I'm not quite sure where they are now, but I'm sure they're in a museum somewhere or on someone's bookshelf. But so you do occasionally find those, and you find other sort of Iron Age settlement features and ditches and things like that. So that's all publicly available as well, that information. So from an archaeology point of view, it is absolutely taken very seriously. And the county archaeologist has also confirmed that there are no constraints to development on the back of the trial trenching that we've undertaken. But there are further investigations to undertake prior to development. Then in terms of ecology, I've got the letter that responded to you here, and there was a reasonable list in there of the real positives from development, which you probably say, of course I'll say that, but at the moment it's a relatively bland, intensively farmed arable field. And what we're doing is producing an overall biodiversity net gain on the site. So it's an improvement from the base case of the arable field. Just whizzing through the list here, we've got 3.5 hectares of new wildflower grassland meadow, which will be created, 1.3 hectares of new amenity grassland, 1.7 kilometres of new native hedgerows, 1.6 hectares of new native woodland. And again, remembering that these are all interlinking with the existing use of wildlife corridors, planted routes around the wider site. So it's interlinking and building a network there. The planting of 441 additional trees and 0.05 hectares of shrubs, 10 bat boxes, 10 bird boxes, 2 hedgehog boxes, 12 invertebrate boxes, and 4 hiberniculi, which I didn't know what they were until a few years ago, but they're piles of wood basically, which I now have put around my garden as well, at no cost to anyone else. We've also got, with Central Bedfordshire, worked in quite a lot of detail on the what will be the creation of a management of 4 skylark plots on the adjacent land, and that really is to manage the impact of the development on the open arable land that we're proposing to build on, and that creates foraging, nesting sites in adjacent fields, focused on skylark specifically, and that's section 106 secured as well. And then yeah, I mean, as I said before, the final point in the letter was just enhancing the network of planting and the corridors for wildlife. And believe it or not, you do, as day one, clearly, you know, it's all new planting, but actually very quickly, you know, the shrubs and trees and bushes and hedges take shape and get established, and it does create quite a sort of habitat on site. Some of the other points, just generally, so just for another few minutes, if I may, we included a market report within the updated elements of the application, which again backs up the demand for for these units and this employment use. And just to reiterate, on phase 2, we built 4 units behind the co-op. One of them was pre-sold to Bond International, who moved from Stevenage. One of them was taken by Bowman Ingredients, who are an existing Stratton Business Park occupier, and so they were desperate for expansion. They expanded into one of the units on our site. One was taken by Bid Food, a food company who similar to Co-op actually, in that they've got a freezer, a chilled area and an ambient area, and they distribute to pubs and restaurants in the wider area. And then a company called Noatum, who are a third-party logistics operator, and they distribute from this warehouse at the moment. It will be clothing. And if you were to drive down there at the moment, it might feel quieter than it will be when it's fully operational, but you have to appreciate we've only just completed building the units. Bond are operational fully from theirs, and then the other 3 occupiers are spending tens of millions each on their possibly not Bowman and Greens, but the other two are spending certainly tens of millions each on their fit outs. And that will take several months to deliver. So they'll be fully operational from the summer and autumn. And there'll be, a lot of jobs created on site already. And again, in the letter, we just highlighted some of the economic benefits of the next phase, subject to planning, with the creation of circa 1,200 jobs. Actually, within the units, another 300 odd construction jobs. The construction spend will be circa £100 million, possibly with up to another £100 million in terms of the fit out for those units as well, depending on what the operators put in there. Clearly, the people there will be using facilities and services locally and hopefully living locally. Through our work and surveys, it was evident that a lot of residents working in the wider logistics distribution sector actually out-commuted from Biggleswade town. So to create these opportunities for jobs locally actually in turn creates a sustainable way of working and be able to commute to work. And then also the business rates that would be generated for the next phase would be about £3 million per annum for the local authority. So it's a considerable generator of business rates. And one thing I know a lot of people raise with me is quality of jobs in the warehouses. And I think I've said before when I presented to you that the amount of quality grade A office space built within the warehouses is considerable. So on the next phase, the next proposed phase, there will be over 50,000 square feet of grade A offices within the warehouses, as well as obviously the warehouse operatives that will be working there. So, so it's a huge amount. And actually since about 2017, from all the various developments of warehouses on Stratton Business Park, so effectively new modern units, there have been about just over 160,000 square feet of offices built. I mean, you simply wouldn't have that quality of development without the storage or production space attached to these office buildings. So it's an important point to raise. I've covered economic benefits. Just very quickly on sustainability. I say quickly, I think because I've covered this before with you, but it's very important to us. I've talked about the cycle provisions, etc. We put EV charging in as standard to circa 20-25% of the car parks, in line with actually usually in excess of local authority standards, depending on the local authority. We also duct the remainder of the car park, so in future, in 5, 10, 15 years, the occupier, the tenant, can actually put in 100% EV chargers if we go that way. I suppose no one knows at the moment. We also duct the yard as well to allow for again future pop-ups for charging vehicles, distribution vehicles, vans, trucks, etc. if required. We've also got an energy centre on site, so if you drive on site past the co-op, you'll see on the left is a box of tricks which has got some various chimneys and things poking out the top of it, which has got about £7 million worth of very complicated switch gear, backup generators, etc. So it's a really clever integrated model, which I'm very, very happy to show you around on a visit if you'd like. But we effectively take the PV power generators, solar panel power generated from the roofs, that goes into the energy centre. First of all, it's used by the tenants at a discount price to the grid. Any excess goes to the energy centre, then goes to the other tenants on the site before being exported to the grid. Although we're slightly limited on export, but we can export a certain amount of power. Problem with the grid nationwide, which I won't go into now. There is a very sustainable sort of power generation on site. You imagine those roofs are quite big, so you can generate a reasonable amount of power on them, and quite rightly so as well. And as long-term owners of the buildings we actually design, fund, install and manage the PV on the roofs for the length of the tenancy. And clearly, if we still own only units, we will then do the same for the following tenants as well. And then I think pretty much one of my final points, we have a community benefit fund, which for the phase 2 latest development we've just delivered is £57,000. So we're working with Central Beds at the moment to work out how we distribute that locally to your dance groups, play groups, scouts, sea cadets, whoever locally, schools, they can all bid for funds, and we will distribute those funds. And quite frankly, the funds have now crystallised, so we're very keen to get those distributed to those that can use it. And then the next phase of developments being heard at committee next week will generate over £90,000 for community benefit fund, assuming we get planning. Again, that would go to local good causes. So I wanted to mention that. So we've got a recommendation for approval from Central Bedfordshire Council. We comply with the neighbourhood plan as a whole. I hope our letter and my presentation this evening will alleviate any concerns that you had about the development. Again, we're long-term owners, we're responsive developers. You've seen me many times before. Possibly will see me again. Don't know. Possibly not. Happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you, Tom, and massively appreciate you coming along and explaining some of this, and for responding to the town council's points. There may be some questions. I think Councillor Foster has one.
Well, firstly, I just wanted to, I think on behalf of my colleagues here, just thank you both for coming, for the sort of the comprehensive update and report, and also I think actually having read through the letter and the responses, my immediate concerns that I had with the development, I think that we all had, were alleviated just by seeing the letter. And I think yes, we objected, but we objected for, I think, for the right reasons. And I think
very good reasons.
I think so from that point of view, really pleased to see the fact that we've got the investment in ecology, the fact that we've got this investment coming to Biggleswade, but not only is it the investment in jobs, it's the fact that we've got it's being done sustainably, and it means that the jobs are being attracted from in the town, I think is really important. And I think it would be very easy of me to sort of pick out bits and pieces in here, but I think on the whole, I mean, I'm very, very impressed with the sort of the way that this has been approached, such that it's we can't sort of rescind our objection as such, but I think it's very clear that the content here very much sort of meets our expectation. Perhaps the one thing that I did want to address with you was in relation to the sustainable transport, and this particularly relates to, and colleagues will understand perhaps my concern about this, where I'm very concerned about the words "up to," because we've had issues recently where another particular organisation has used the words "up to" in a planning document, which effectively could mean anything. So I appreciate that so what we're talking about. We're talking about the shuttle bus service, and provide for a period of up to 5 years. Now, I appreciate that this is all going to be funded by the £750,000 worth of investment. So, and you won't be controlling the how long it lasts, but I think we've had issues previously where if we're not clear on it will provide it for 5 years, and if up to 5 years could be 6 months. So
it's committed in the section 106.
I appreciate that. So I want to address that at this point. I did have one other concern, and that relates to the roundabout onto London Road from Bexley's Drive. Now I'm looking at the drawing here, and obviously it does the widening of that does depend on highways. So the ownership of the highway land. So
it's all within highways land.
So are you comfortable that the road will be wide enough to allow a HGV and a car to pass?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a very fair point, because you often see these things delivered and that they're too tight or they haven't got the right road markings on, but there's a plan that was submitted which shows a swept path analysis, and it's what we do for all our developments, both on-site and the off-site access roads, because clearly we don't want to build something that doesn't work. We certainly wouldn't let it. And so you've got a swept path plan which shows the route of an HGV would take as it turned left to the A1, for example, and a car turning right, and that very clearly proves that there's plenty of capacity there. And we work with Central Beds Highways on that. It's fair point.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I've got nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Strawn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for the excellent report. It's, I think, alleviated a lot of concerns, but a couple of questions effectively with regard to ongoing matters. Firstly, I like the idea of the ecological parts, and that looks very attractive. But my concern there is how and who is going to manage it in the long term and how that's going to be covered. And the second point effectively relates around all the money that's available for the town, whether it's for the sustainable buses or for community use, etc., that is meant for the benefit of the use of the town. Personally, I would like the town council to be consulted with CBC and with your good selves on how these monies are distributed, because we know the town, and although we've got several central beds councillors, I feel that the town council should at least be able to have some input, if that is permissible from your point of view, in determining how this money can be used, because I think it's essential that this is great benefit to the town, but we also need to get the benefit of the money from it for the benefit of the town, not for the rest of Central Bedfordshire.
Thank you, Councillor Strawn. Tom, did you want to respond to any of that?
Yeah, so if I take the 2 points, so firstly, the ecology and the management of the park. So again, we're from a pure presentation point of view first, we're long-term owners of these assets. So we take great pride, as you'll see if you drive around, the signage, the landscaping, the stripes in the lawns, the hedges, and the wild areas being managed as wild areas. So we do take great pride in that. We have a management company, you'll know Savills, who they manage all of our sites across the UK. So there are 80 assets across the UK, and they manage all of those, and they manage them in line with our expectations, which are very high, and in line with planning. And all the tenants on site pay a service charge, as you'd expect, which is then used to manage the site. So yes, they are professionally managed. And in terms, secondly, then in terms of the community benefit fund, I really welcome someone from the town council being involved, or a nominee being involved, because clearly you guys know better than I do who is more in need. But I'm hoping that there's a sensible pot there in terms of that. Certainly the initial 57,000 that's already available, plus the 90 that could be available, and it needs to be spent correctly in the right places. And yes, and that needs careful management. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you, Tom, for your letter and your presentation. I think, as others have said, it does alleviate a lot of certainly the concerns I had. I just really wanted to echo some of the points that Councillor Strawn made, particularly around the community fund. I think it is vital that we are engaged in that. So I think what I would hate to see is that the CVC were to divert that money to projects in Dunstable, for example, rather than it being used here in Biggleswade. And we know from past experience that they have a tendency to use money generated by building projects in this area elsewhere. So yeah, anything you can do to ensure that we're engaged and involved in that distribution process would be much appreciated.
Thank you. Councillor Alban.
Thank you. Yeah, like all of my colleagues have said, yeah, very pleased to see what's in this, and it certainly seems to address most of our concerns. I'm particularly pleased to see the pedestrian crossing in near to the London Road roundabout. I think that was something that was missing in the original sort of design of the area, and that's to be welcomed. Following on from Councillor Mark Foster's comments, I'm just wondering about HGVs turning right at the London roundabout. So the left-hand lane is 4.48 metres, I think, and the right-hand lane is 3.73. And there's a picture of a HGV in one and a car in the other. So, I mean, there will be some HGVs making a right turn there, I guess. So I wonder how that's being.
Yeah, I mean, that they were such a very small percentage of any journeys, because clearly we wouldn't want HGVs ideally to go towards the town centre unless they were delivering to the town centre, quite frankly. So you might have the odd co-op truck that heads that way, but otherwise 99+% go towards the A1. So in the very, very rare circumstance that one did get it right, then there is enough room clearly for an HGV to turn right. I'd need to check whether I presume it would leave enough room for a car to turn left at the same time as it's swapping over, but it's a very, very rare circumstance.
Yeah, I would guess there will be some that would take Saxon Drive off towards Potham and they need to turn right.
Quite potentially,
so it won't just be the town centre.
Yeah, no, you're right, and but again, it was such a tiny percentage that it was deemed that that it operated in the right capacity for that situation.
Thank you. Okay. This item comes up later on the agenda in a moment, Councillor Russell. So I understand we have the opportunity to consider responding again if we so wish in light of new information, but that does require a resolution of council in order to proceed with that item. That's in line with one of the standing orders. You've got them in front of you. We're discussing them in a minute. Did somebody want to make a proposal about whether or not we take item 10A? We don't have to do it now. We can when we get onto it. Councillor Russell.
I'm quite happy to propose on the basis of what we've heard that we do reconsider this planning application and submit a further response to Central Bedfordshire Council for the late sheet.
Okay, is there a seconder for that proposal? There are various seconders. Wonder which way it's going to go. Okay, are there any comments? No, so all those in favour of discussing this item and under section 10A, but submitting a further response for the late sheet to Central Beds. All those in favour of that proposal, please show. That is everybody. Thank you. Okay, Tom, you are free either to wait and join us for that, or you're welcome to leave. It's up to you. Councillor Russell, did you want to?
I just wanted to ask one or two questions.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You were very fast.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Okay.
They're not huge issues, although one of them is a real nuisance and could be a safety issue. But first of all, you talked about the neighbourhood plan, and one of the clauses in the neighbourhood plan is about facilities for lorry drivers. And you've explained how you provide the facilities on site for both, presumably, the company's own drivers, but also visiting drivers. I'd just like Tritax to consider whether they should be providing a wider facility on some of their sites, because it is a national problem where lorry drivers have nowhere to park up and they have to stop driving at certain points. So I'm just putting that forward as something for Tritax on a wider basis to think about. And if I could just go on, the buses, you're giving 5 years worth of funding. When we were looking at the home farm site, which is the other side of the A1, and which is in the local plan, we were talking about the possibility of part of the service charges from the tenants going towards supporting a bus service on a much longer term basis. So that's something else that I just want to talk about, because we have had the issue in the past where 5 years and then everything stops, which, I mean, we're going towards trying to be more sustainable as a society, but whether that service is actually sustainable after 5 years is a moot point. And then finally, there's a funny little roundabout outside Lidl. And I think there's a concern about how safe that is and whether it's in exactly the right place. So perhaps you could include that, looking at that in what you do. I think it's only a case of moving the paint on the road, isn't it?
Yeah, it always is.
Thank you.
Tom, go on.
Thanks, Councillor Russell, for all those calls.
Tom, do you want to just put your microphone on?
Sorry, I'll tell you.
That's all right.
The facilities for HGV drivers. So on site, you'll see that all the buildings are designed with 55 metre yards, which provide lots of HGV parking. You usually have a separate access for the drivers into the unit. There's the ability, there's showers in there already, but their ability to increase the number of showers and driver office and welfare. And very often what we find is that the the tenants tend to control that rather than us. Some will go out of their way to provide, pool tables and vending machines and everything else, which I think is the right thing to do, and others will probably provide very little. So that point is taken. I'll go away and have a think about what we could do wider in terms of the site, but again, that might be wider expansion of the business park in the future, might incorporate a lorry park, for example. But that's certainly point noted. The second one on the buses, we've done a lot of work on this ourselves and with Central Beds in terms of the number of employees on site and the number of users. I mean, a co-op alone, there'll be around 1,200 employees. Never mind the phase 2 site, which is probably, these are estimates at the moment because they haven't quite opened and fully operational, but probably 600 or so. So, if you're at circa, well, you're not quite getting to 2,000 already just on our Simity Park element of the site, with another 1,100-1,200 jobs with this next phase. So there's a real quantum of individuals there, and with one would hope that people within Biggleswade who are already here will want the new jobs at the site, so sustainable commuting, want to use the buses, but also people getting the train or travelling around the park may well as well. So we will work very closely with Central Beds and the travel plan coordinator to make sure that the service becomes sustainable.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't say about the roundabout.
Go on, yes.
There wasn't any, in our extensive discussions with Central Beds, there were no proposals to amend the roundabout. But in creating a pedestrian crossing adjacent to it and widening the Pegasus Drive roundabout, that I understand that felt that the flows through there would be more efficient. And also the fact that pedestrians are crossing, you've got a pedestrian crossing in place and associated road markings would make that whole stretch of Pegasus Drive slower and safer for pedestrians and cyclists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brown has a question. Hold on a second. This
Just
is going to be
following
the
on
last question though, because we've spent quite a bit of time on this and we know that we're going to consider it in a moment. So Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Just following on from what you just said there, in total, the number of new employers, is it 2,000 or more?
1,200, I think.
1,120 is the estimate for the operational stage of the next phase of development. But the numbers I was including was the phase 2 we've just delivered, which will have an estimate of circa 600, possibly more. And then the co-op who are ramping up to circa 1,200 employees. That's ignoring the rest of Stratton Park, of course.
So once the development is finished, how many employees would there be?
So for the next phase of the development, there'll be 1,120 is the estimate for there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Tom. So we will consider this again in a few minutes' time. You're welcome to stay. If you want to go, you can also go. I'll leave it entirely up to you.
I'll happily stay in case there are any questions.
Okay. Yep, that's fine. Feel free to stay there. That's okay. Item 6, members' questions. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Strawn.
Yes, could we have an update on the coronation dinner, the lunch effort? I know it's gone onto Facebook today, but I think the council would like to know a little bit more about the arrangements and what's intended.
Do officers have an update on this? No, I think perhaps we could email this round if that's all right, please, because I know that not everybody can access Twitter and Facebook and do we have a TikTok account yet? No, maybe that's one for the future. But LinkedIn. So we can perhaps circulate that because it is fast approaching, isn't it, Councillor Strawn? So yes, but is that okay?
It's just a bit more about the detail because I know it's been advertised and because we had an email earlier this evening, I think. But I would like to, I think we ought to know a bit more of the detail.
Thank you, Councillor Strawn. Any further members' questions? Councillor Woodhead?
Thank you. I was pleased to see earlier on this week that the EV chargers have been installed on the bulk car park and seem to be up and running. I saw somebody charging it this evening. I'm unclear as to where we got to. I know the council recommended about restricted hours around usage because the parking for Lawnside School and the Lawns Nursery and parking bays and so on. I just wondered if we'd had a response back from central beds about whether that was going to be taken forward or put in place or whatever, because obviously the charges are now there, but clearly after Easter people will be using that car park more heavily, once they're back at school again. So just some clarity as to where we were.
Yeah, I think there was a private meeting about this, wasn't there, with Tom Price from Central Beds, and some feedback was given. And we as a council responded formally. Could we get some transparency over the TPOs, unless Councillor Bond knows anything?
I haven't got the information to my fingerprints. This information has already been discussed at traffic management and decision was made. I haven't got the information in front of me. So this has already been to traffic management.
Right, it has. Okay.
Yes.
Perhaps we could share that with Councillor Woodhead, since he's asked a question, if that's all right. Does anybody else want to be included on that circulation? Yeah, most councillors. So if we could circulate that to all councillors, please. Just the outcome of the Traffic Management Committee meeting. Anything else? Any other members' questions? No, then we're taking minutes and recommendations from meetings. We're taking the minutes from Town Council meeting held on Tuesday, the 28th of March. So going through these for accuracy, first of all, I'm on page 7. Anything on page 7? Page 8? Page 9, Councillor Strawn?
Yes, under item 8, second paragraph, third word from the end, shouldn't it be informal rather than informed?
Yes. Anything else? No. Page 10, Councillor Pullinger?
Yeah, item 9D, it says we resolve to reject. I think we resolve to object to rather than reject.
Correct. Yes, to respond with an objection. Yes, it's right. It wasn't our decision to make. Anything else on page 10? No. Accuracy on page 11? No. Page 12? No. So subject to those two changes, are we okay that these are a true and accurate record of the meeting? Yes. Thank you. Item 8, matters arising, same set of minutes, any matters arising. Page 7. No. Page 8. No. Page 9. Councillor Strawn?
But last paragraph of item 8, matters arising. Have we got any update on the police action with regard to the damage at the Franklin Recreation Ground?
Any update? No, not at this moment. We have provided CCTV footage, I believe, of various perpetrators. Is there any update on this? Okay. Okay. Can we pursue this, please? Because I know I've heard on the grapevine that there's been some more activity, and obviously with some of the security provisions we've put in place, we should be able to pick up on some of this. Councillor Strawn?
Yes, I'm appalled that the police haven't issued a crime reference number after all these weeks. That is absolutely appalling. And I think we should, I think we might be meeting with the Commissioner very shortly, but this is absolutely disgraceful. We should have got a crime reference number by now. If we were putting in an insurance claim, they would want it. It's not acceptable.
Thank you. We'll minute that. Anything else on item 9, on page 9? Page 10? Matters arising, page 11. Page 12. No. So that is that for matters arising. Item 9, items for consideration. 9A, preparation for annual statutory meeting for members to receive and consider a report by Town Clerk. Peter, is there anything to introduce here? It's quite a few pages of stuff.
Maybe just a couple of minutes, if that's all right. So,
sure.
Obviously, we're getting ready for the annual statutory meeting.
So could you put your microphone on, please?
Obviously, we're getting ready for the annual statutory meeting. It's good practice that we review our key documentation before that takes place. We've been doing that in partnership with our members to try and ascertain potential amendments to the key documents. Outside of the meeting this evening, some members have been in contact with me to say that whilst they fundamentally support some of the direction of travel connected to this, there remains some formatting related issues connected to some of the documentation. And a good example might be an inconsistency around reference to the senior authority. in other words, Central Bedfordshire Council or Central Beds. So I think there's some minor tidying up connected to formatting, but there's a general sense that the direction of travel is good. There's also been some minor amendments connected to whether or not we should or shouldn't call it scheme of delegation or delegations. There isn't a consistent practice throughout the UK. And the point of reference, which is the Joint Panel on Accountability and Governance, again, there's no consistency in regard to this. So you either do one or the other. Yeah. Otherwise, no.
Thank you. Okay, comments, Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. My main comments are in relation to the standing orders and the review of the standing orders. I'm quite disappointed that the version of the standing orders that have been circulated are not our current standing orders. In that we amended them in March 2022 to remove from Standing Order 29 the requirement for members to stand when addressing council. That was brought up at the informal meeting that was held with the working group meeting that was held, and we were assured that that would be corrected before this came to council, and it hasn't been. So it is incorrect in terms of what we have been asked to review and not the standing orders that we should be reviewing. I'm also really quite disappointed with the fact that it was March 2021 when council first resolved to review our standing orders thoroughly, and we're at a point now 2 years later where that still hasn't been done, and I think we really ought to have completed this well before now, but we are where we are on that respect. But I just think it is disappointing that what's been presented to us, we're not able to review and approve because it's not accurate.
I would just say on that latter point, thank you, Councillor Pullinger. I would just say on that latter point, I was asked some months ago when we were tracking some of the deliverables at a very operational level, the extent to which this was a priority. The indication that I gave to staff was that there were perhaps a few more pressing things that came first, and we are, I admit, now at a point where we're considering these quite quickly. So I accept my share of responsibility there. However, it's up to council how to proceed, given that we have the documents in front of us. Further comments? Councillor Foster?
Yeah, just my one was in relation to the member induction. So it's referenced in the paper, but there seems to be no detail behind it. And it would be, I think, for me, and I think for new members, it would be helpful to have had some input from existing members, perhaps to deal with any missing elements or anything that could be useful for the new members, particularly when new members join the council on the last intake, what they learned and what would have benefited from. So be keen to see when that's coming. And I think there would be a good opportunity if we're not going to be able to bring it to council. I think we need to have something in place in advance of the new members joining the council formally in May.
Thank you. Peter, you wanted to respond?
Just ever so briefly. Obviously, this has been an important issue for officers initially to try and draft some documentation. We're about 95% there in getting together an indicative pack for you to look through. I think you're going to be happy with it, and we're traveling in the right direction. So please be assured that when it's ready, and it is a matter of days now, it will come out to you and you can have a look and tell us your observations.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Russell.
Well, it says in the paper that formal training has been commissioned from BATPC. And as the Vice Chairman of BATPC at the moment, I'd just like to say that that's a very thorough grounding in the basic laws that we all have to adhere to. And I mean, obviously not specific to this council, but it's basic finance, basic laws that we have to adhere to. So it is actually good training, which I don't think we had the opportunity for new councillors last time to attend because of the pandemic and everything else. But, you know, that with a pack of documents is a good basis, although I agree with Councillor Foster that it may be that people around the table could add other things that might be of help.
Thank you. Further comments? If not, then we're looking for a recommendation. Anyone wishes to put their head above the parapet? Anyone at all? Well, there is a recommendation from officers. Does anybody wish to move that recommendation? Councillor Alban.
I'll move that very recommendation.
Okay, you'll move that recommendation. Okay, that's been seconded. Councillor Pullinger, you wish to comment?
Can I propose an amendment, please, that after existing standing orders, the words "as amended on the 8th of March 2022" are added, please.
Say that again, sorry. As amended.
As amended on the 8th of March 2022.
Right. Okay. Are you happy with that amendment? Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Strawn?
Yes, could we just add the comments that the clerk made earlier, subject to the tidying up, if I can use that phrase, exercise on the detail of the document, not the purport, but just standardisation of terminology such as Central Bedfordshire Council, Central Beds Council, so that there's a consistency.
Okay.
I'll happily take that on board too.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. You're being very generous. Any further comments? Councillor Foster's looking at me like he wants to make a comment. With your microphone, please. Sorry, Councillor Foster.
Yes. It relates to the audit, and it does make reference to the standing orders being under review. They may well be, but I don't think we've actually agreed that they're under review yet. So we've agreed that we will do them, but they're not currently under review. So is this do we need to note that or not?
Councillor Pullinger?
Just on that point, there have been many resolutions of this council that the standing orders are under review since March 2021. And we have deferred that review on a number of occasions, but I think it is a fair comment to make that they are under review. The latest resolution we actually made in terms of review of the standing orders actually deferred that review to June 2023. Now, I won't be a member when that comes along, but those of you that are, assuming some of you get re-elected, I would hope will enact that resolution of council.
Thank you. Okay. Does anything need to be added or removed around standing or being seated at council, given what we're adopting? Councillor Pullinger?
That was my amendment.
That was your amendment. Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I'm obviously on a world of my own. Right. Okay. Okay, that's enough terrible jokes. I do the rubbish jokes around here. Okay. We have a proposal. The proposal is subject to the amendment that Councillor Pullinger has proposed, which has been accepted, and the tidying up of language in order to make it consistent throughout the document. Other than that, all documents, other than that, we are proposing to go with the recommendation as set out. So any last comments? No. All those in favour of that proposal, please show. That is everybody. Thank you. So the standing orders are whatever the recommendation says. Yes. Perfect. Thank you. Item 9B. Interim internal audit report for members to receive and consider a report from the Town Clerk and Chief Executive. Peter, do you want to comment on this?
It's a very short introduction. This is the second of the 3 reports that we'll have in this financial year. The third one will take place, I believe it's next week, is that right? This Friday. There are no obvious issues of concern that the internal auditor has highlighted. So obviously for members to consider the contents of her report, and this will be the last report from this particular auditor, and as members decided to use Helis and Lodge going forward. Obviously, the third report will be included in the AGAR, which is not far away for the council to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from members? No comments? Councillor Russell?
I move that we note the report and are grateful that for the input from staff to get a clean report.
Thank you. Okay, is there a seconder for the proposal to note this? There is. Any last comments? No, so we're noting this report. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. And recording our thanks to staff for turning this around quite quickly. Item 10A, which we will now consider. So for members to receive and consider the attached correspondence from Tritax Cemetery, which we spoke about a few moments ago. This is if the council wishes to reconsider its position. We've already moved that we do wish to provide further commentary representations, and we now have the opportunity to do just that. So comments, Councillor Strawn?
Do we actually have to propose a resolution in accordance with standing orders to reconsider it?
That was part of the standing orders. You have to make the proposal.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying.
Yeah.
Do we need to make reference to the fact that we are considering it as in accordance with standing orders because we're dealing with it within the 6 months?
Okay, well, I'm sure we can minute that appropriately.
Yeah.
But we know we're doing that because we've.
Appreciate that, but I thought we'd do it, just spell it out that we do need to make reference to it.
Okay. Comments, Councillor Pullinger?
Thank you. So, I mean, I think most of the discussion we've already had, probably, but on that basis, I'd like to propose that we write to Central Bedfordshire and effectively withdrawing our objection with a copy of this letter as reference that we've received as references to that the information provided in here, as long as this is delivered, alleviates our concerns. I appreciate there may be some minor not objections, some minor amendments to that, what I've just said that members may make, but I think that's the basis of what we should write to Central Beds.
Thank you. Okay, so it's to write to Central Beds referencing this letter. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Yes, there are. Councillor Bond.
I'm not seconding, I just need to make it very clear that I haven't taken part in any of this conversation, this application, because I'm a member of DMC. So I have not passed any comment about it. I'll have to obviously have an open mind when it comes to planning next week.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Strawn.
And I have no difficulty with the proposal, but I would like possibly an add-on to it in that we have discussed that there are various financial arrangements and section conditions under section 106 that will be coming in. I would like this town council to add that we would appreciate being consulted on the section 106 conditions and the monies that will be forthcoming from that condition, those conditions.
Yeah, it's some of those community monies, isn't it? But probably also the one
and generally on section 106, if we can.
Okay, so there's a suggestion for is that a suggestion for an amendment?
Just an amendment or
okay. Are you happy with that or not?
I'm happy to that. I would actually probably go a little bit stronger on the community funding and that we would like to be formally represented in any distribution of the funds in relation to that.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Strawn did second. So
I'm more than happy with that.
Further comments, Councillor Russell?
I wonder if council would give permission for me to go to DMC next week and answer any questions on our change of view and why.
Okay.
That's what DMC wants.
Right. Is there a mood among councillors for Councillor Russell to represent us? Yeah, I'm seeing nods. Thank you. Further comments, Councillor Foster.
Just in relation to section 106, I know we've made reference to that, you know, and you want that in there. Does the council feel that it's necessary, given that all section 106 should be coming in our direction? So I'm not sure that it's absolutely necessary to put it in a letter. However, I understand that our concerns, but it should automatically. I'm absolutely supportive of the community funds. I'm not sure it's necessary with the section 106 for the town.
Thank you. Councillor Bond?
I'm not passing comment on this, but just as I've said many times before, that when applications go to Central Beds, especially like DMC, councils are suggested to be able to make recommendations to Central Beds planners or to DMC as to how they would like the S106 to be spent. Central Beds might not listen to you, but the fact is it's always the case that you need to, if you have certain things on mind, you might consider. We're probably a bit late on this respect, but actually that's what we should always, that's what the council should always be doing in the event of an application being passed. We should always bear that in mind. I think we actually, when we looked at the way we respond to planning applications, the which has been done recently, one of the things in there is about S106.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey?
There is actually a community wind farm group where we meet to discuss what's going to happen to the grants that we get from the wind farm. And that's 2 Central Beds councillors, 2 town councillors, and it's administered by Central Beds, but only administered by Central Beds. The decisions are made by the committee. And I'm wondering if this might be a similar thing you could do here.
I think that's, if I may say from the chair, a very sensible suggestion, because this is slightly different from normal Section 106
Yes.
money. But it is also, as I think Tom was saying, sort of pot of money that needs some governance over it as a result, to make sure that it's treated fairly among potential bidders.
Well,
sorry, go on, Councillor Ramsey.
At the wind farm meetings, anybody that actually wants to come forward and ask for a certain amount of money, they can then come to that committee and put their case.
Yes.
Say like a community bus or whatever, but they come to that committee and they make their case. And I think also in the beginning with the wind farm group, there was a representative of the company there, which if you fancy sitting on another committee, Tom. But, yes, so it was a good all round. Everybody knew where the money was going and what it was going for.
Thank you. Okay, can I just pause a moment? I'll come to you in a second, Councillor Russell, because I want us to be precise in what we're responding with, because at the moment, there's a proposal that we write to Central Bedfordshire, reference in this letter, saying that it deals with the concerns that we have, therefore we have no objection. There was then a suggestion to add to that, that the Town Council would like to be involved in the deployment of the decisions related to 106 monies, but it seems like this needs to be perhaps a little bit more specific about whether or not it's perhaps the whole governance around that particular community pot, and whether we add that onto our comments as well. Councillor Russell, Councillor Pullinger.
I think we're tying ourselves in knots. What we've been told about tonight, what is in the letter and the other papers that we've received, is how Section 106 money is going to be spent. So surely if we say that what was in the original proposal, that if the money is spent like that, we withdraw our objection. What are we going to do at this moment? I mean, Councillor Bond talked about extra Section 106. You know, there comes a point when any development is not viable. We have talked in the past about what we want. We've got things in the neighbourhood plan that talk about how to use Section 106 and the key issues for us, including, of course, things like the football provision that we've talked about endlessly in council. So I think we're tying ourselves in knots, and I think our position ought to be that we write to Central Beds and say that we've received this letter as attached, and if all of those obligations are fulfilled, we withdraw our objection and leave it at that, but except for the community fund, and say that we would like to see the community fund managed in the same way that the wind farm is, because that seems a sensible way forward, if councillors would agree to that.
Okay. Councillor Pullinger, there have been lots of comments. Would you like to just confirm your proposal? I don't think any negate what you were trying to
essentially what Councillor Russell has just said.
Okay. Councillor Pullinger, would you like to withdraw your proposal? Would anyone else like to make one? I'm joking. Okay. Are there any last comments? No. So the proposal is that we write to Central Bedfordshire, referencing the letter, explaining that if those obligations are met, which it appears that they will be by this planning application, that the Town Council withdraws its objection and therefore has no objection to this planning application. That we would like also to be involved in establishing a panel similar to that of the wind farm panel to help manage some of those community monies. And we also say separately that we don't need to put this in the response, but Councillor Russell will go and speak at the planning committee when this is considered shortly. Can I just say we need to be a little hasty with this, please? I think if we're going to make the late sheet for DMC, so this is quite urgent to get this written up and out the door, ready for Central Beds to consider. Everybody clear what we're voting on? Yes. All those in favour of the proposal, please show. That is everybody except Councillor Bond, who doesn't vote on these things. So thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for staying. And thank you again for your engagement with the Town Council. There was a lot of thought given as to whether we should object or not. but it seems that we are now in a position where I think we're much happier as a council with what's going ahead, alleviating some very long-standing problems for the town. So I think, if I may just say from the chair, we're very grateful for your engagement with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And,
thank you.
Look forward to a long and fruitful relationship in Biggleswade with you.
No
So,
doubt. See you on the new panel. Look forward to it. All right. Thank you. Okay, you don't need to stay for the rest of our meeting now. So thank you ever so much. Item 10B, 12 Wiseman Road, loft conversion with 2 front-facing flat roof dormers and roof lights to the rear. Comments? Subject to your neighbours and our usual wording? Okay. 10C, land west of Salcombe Close, flatten 2 existing mounds, erect a replacement slide and install lighting bollards. Any comments on this? Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. So I know that when we considered this in June, we provisionally objected essentially because we felt we didn't have enough information. We have some more information, but not a huge amount, I think, that, and it doesn't fully, I think, address some of the questions that we had. So they do explain in some of the updated documentation why the CCTV is no longer considered, and they're considering removing that from the Section 106 commitment, essentially because they are saying that in agreement with Central Bedfordshire Council, they've decided that it's not required anymore and that these measures would resolve the antisocial behaviour that's being observed. So what isn't clarified in any way by the documentation is what the changes to the fencing that are proposed are. There's no, other than changes to fencing, there's no reference to what they are in any of the documentation at all. It shows that the lighting columns that are proposed are the 1 metre high bollards, nothing higher. So from an impact on the neighbours' perspective, I think that might be satisfied. But my bigger concern is the fact that I don't believe that this will actually resolve the antisocial behaviour issues. There may be some benefit from reducing the mounds, but my understanding is the majority of the antisocial behaviour is taking place in the late afternoon, early evening, following when the school finishes at the end of the day. So most of the time that's in daylight, so the lighting will have minimal impact. So there's not really, other than the fact that it seems no one particularly wants to do it, there doesn't seem to be any clarification as to why the CCTV is actually not deemed appropriate anymore. Open to, obviously, to other members' thoughts, but my view is that we should probably continue to object to this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Pullinger. Let's hear other members' thoughts, comments. I must say, if I say from the chair, I have knocked on some doors around Salcombe Close, and I spoke to, I probably had 5 conversations, and antisocial behaviour wasn't raised, even when prompted, you know, stuff related to the school, etc. But I don't know what evidence we have for antisocial behaviour. Perhaps there's a particular number of police reports related to that park, for example. Don't know where it's coming from. It's not clear to me at all. If it's just one person who seems to be quite noisy, which we've seen before, doesn't seem like very strong grounds, but that's just me speculating a little bit. Councillor Pullinger, you nearly made a proposal. Councillor Foster looks like he might nearly make one.
But I'm of a similar view, really. I think it's more. It seems to be more anecdotal around the antisocial behaviour. Although there has been I think anecdotally, we felt previously when we considered this application that there had been an issue. So I guess I'm satisfied with the removal of the CCTV, albeit we've had our own experience of issues with play areas without CCTV, and I think there's a potential issue there. So, but on balance, on balance, I am inclined to say that we should not object to this. So I'm going to make a formal proposal that we don't object to this and that we allow them to get on with it.
Okay, is there a seconder? Yeah, there are seconders. Further comments, Councillor Strawn?
Is that subject to neighbours?
Is it subject to neighbours? Thank you, Councillor Russell. Microphone, please.
There isn't any information about the fencing, that's sure, when I looked on CVC's website. But I note that it's been called into DMC because of what's assumed to be higher fencing and making it less of an open space, which I thought was a bit odd. I have to say, I think I'm with Councillor Foster on this one.
Okay. Any last comments? The only thing I would say from the chair is it is a bit of a shame to lose the mounds. I think they're quite a nice feature in a way. And if we were to have more play areas which had that sort of soft landscaping rather than hard fencing, if there's a way of making it work, perhaps that's something for us to think about when new play areas come forward as part of new applications. So we have a proposal not to object subject to neighbours. All those in favour of that proposal, please show. Any against? That's carried. Oh, against, yeah, I'm also against. That's carried. 10D, the Red Lion, number 1, London Road, blocking up existing access from London Road and creation of a new vehicular access via the bulk. Councillor Alban.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest that we object to this. The current use of the Red Lion is as a public house. There was an application to convert it to residential, but that was refused. So given that its usage is a public house, by stopping up the current access and moving it to the bulk, how many cars are going to use that access to get to the car park, which obviously you can't get to from the existing access? How a delivery is going to be arranged. The opening is opposite a junction. It's very close to the end of a cycleway. I think that will be a much more dangerous access than the current access. So for all those reasons, I think we should object. So I'll propose that we do object.
Okay, so recommendation to object. So proposal, sorry, to object on safety grounds, notably because the Red Lion is a public house. If it were operating as a public house, considerable, potentially large numbers of vehicle movements out onto a road which is an opposite a junction and with a cycleway on it. Is that fair? So a seconder for that proposal. There are a few seconders. Comments? Councillor Russell.
I'd just like to add to what Councillor Alban has said, because he's quite right to say that currently it's a public house, and it's a bit odd to get this application without knowing what the current owners intend to do with the site. It's very odd, and I'm on edge about that. I wonder what's going to come forward. So I'm completely with objecting. And if you look on the Central Beds website, the pub was granted planning permission for this change of access back in 2014. But of course, the balk has been changed since then with the one-way system and the cycle lane. So I don't think that should be an issue. I don't think that they should be able to go back and say, well, we were granted this 9 years ago. You know, it's very different circumstances. So yes, I fully support what Councillor Alban has proposed.
Councillor Foster.
Similar. I mean, I think there's clearly space on the site, and it's if there is one access to the site, and that happens to be, if we were to approve or not object to it, what is the landowner's intention? Is there a a potential for other use of the land that might come forward. So I think we should be absolutely objecting. And if at some point in the future the landowner does bring forward a further application, they'll need to address any other access issues at that point.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Woodhead.
Thank you. And I think all the main points have already been made, and I agree with the objection. I mean, this isn't necessarily something you can put in the planning response, but it's very interesting that the fence that was in the location where the entrance is proposed has been, left to rack and ruin, and there's just a metal fence there. It's convenient that the wooden fence has not been replaced, despite the fact it's collapsed. And also there is a house number, in fact, on the front of the Red Lion now. It says number 1 London Road on it. So I'm equally concerned about this sort of creep, if you like, of change in use without it being properly discussed. But no, it's absolutely dangerous. It's on a very busy corner, the cycle path, one-way system. It all points and literally in the wrong direction. So we should oppose it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any last comments? No, so we have a proposal. The proposal is to object on the grounds of safety, namely that this is still a public house with a car park, which, were the public house operating, would have a large number of vehicle movements out onto a road which is opposite a junction and coming out onto a cycleway. Is that a fair summary? Have I missed anything?
The delivery arrangements.
Oh yes, and some lack of clarity over the delivery arrangements. And Councillor Russell?
I think it was very useful what a colleague said about if a proper planning application is brought forward for the site, then that should include the access arrangements rather than doing them separately. I think that's a good point to make.
Okay, are you happy to add that, Councillor Alban? Okay. Everybody clear what we're voting on? All those in favour of objecting on those grounds, please show. That is everybody, except Councillor Bond. 10E, 4 Stoneland Avenue, retrospective planning permission for the erection of an annex. Comments? None subject to neighbours? Okay. 10F, 29 Lilac Grove, single-storey rear extension and installation of solar panels and a new front porch. Any comments? Subject to neighbours? G, Biggleswade Baptist Church, erection of a wooden shed workshop and retention of 2 existing sheds. Subject to neighbours again? Yeah, okay. 11, planning application outcomes, report of the planning application outcomes as of 29th of March. Do you have any comments on this? Councillor Knight.
Thank you. Third from the bottom of page 128 is Market Square 17. The report says this is awaiting decision. I believe that's inaccurate. Checking on the Central Beds portal, it shows that permission was granted on the 31st of March.
This was as of the 29th, but yes.
Ah, okay. I didn't see that, apologies. Anyway, so permission has been granted. This is one of 2 buildings which we objected to on the grounds that it contravened Central Beds Design Supplement 6, shop front and signage, section 5.04, design principles, and basically disallows illuminated signage within the conservation area. I know the other planning application, which was submitted afterwards for 8 High Street, hasn't been granted, but it worries me that this sets quite a dangerous precedent and appears to indicate that Central Beds aren't following their own design guidelines. I also note they are 2 different planning officers. Noting these concerns, I wonder whether officers would be able to contact the 2 planning officers concerned and inquire as to why permission was granted in contravention with the design guidance. I also note the objection the Town Council filed lacks some of the detail that we discussed in the room. So it's possible the officers weren't aware of the very specific references to documents. And that may be unfortunate and may be the reason, but maybe if officers could follow up with Central Beds and report back to us, that'd be very helpful, please.
Okay, yeah, could we minute that, please? Councillor Bond.
I've already noted this, and I've already raised it with Central Beds planners, Jenny Selly and Head of Planning, Andrew Davey, because there's an inconsistency here, and there's no point having a policy if it's not being listened to and it's not not being adhered, it's not being adhered to. It defeats the whole object of our neighbourhood plan. It defeats the whole object of consistency. We can't afford two different planning officers to make two different reasons, two different decisions when there's no reason for it. And as far as the latter one, which Councillor Knight mentions, I think my intervention has made them consider, so we'll have to see what happens.
Thank you. Councillor Russell?
I think it's good what Councillor Bond has done, but I don't think that officers here should be contacting the individual planning officers. I think that they should be writing to Andrew Davey as head of planning and say that we note these two decisions. We're very disappointed. Refer to the design guide and refer to the neighbourhood plan, and ask him to ensure that future decisions conform with the current legislation.
Thank you. Councillor Knight is nodding. Are you happy for that?
So I think that's
Okay, so if we could minute, please, we write to Andrew Davey citing these the lack of consistency over implementing existing planning policy. Any further comments on planning application outcomes? No, so we move on. Item 12, accounts. There are no accounts for this agenda. Item 13, there are no items for information for this agenda. Item 14, public open session, to adjourn for a period of up to 15 minutes to allow members of the public to put questions or to address the council through the chairman in respect to any business of the town council. Members of the public give their name before speaking and have 1 3-minute slot. We have a member of the public who's not signalling. Anyone online? No. Okay, then we move on. So item 15, exempt items. Following resolution that we move into exempt session. So we have 1 exempt item. Somebody happy to move that we go into exempt? Yeah, okay. Any dissent? No, so we go into